Started investing when I was 13. I'm 44 years old now. So if you want the entire story, it's sit down, everybody, take a beer.
An hour. This is the first interview for Turn Off, Turn On Ventures, and I've been in contact with Robin quite frequently, so I'm hoping to let this go free flow and see where it goes to. I think I really want to explore how he grounded his roots and set up his roots here in Asia, sort of moving in without knowing anyone. So that's going to be interesting, and then of course to learn a bit more about his personal investment history and philosophy. So looking forward to sharing that content with you guys. Okay, so today we are here to do a turn off, turn on interview. This is my first interview with Robin, and I've known Robin almost 9 months now, and our interactions have gone across from his business to what I'm doing as an investor, and it's been a very interesting development from the day we met. Maybe you can share with us, like, what's your journey as an investor? When do you start investing, and I think more interestingly, how did that change when you moved to Singapore?
Okay, how long do you want me to answer?
The interesting parts of your investment journey.
The reason I'm asking, I started investing when I was 13. I'm 44 years old now. So if you want the entire story, it's sit down, everybody, take a beer.
An hour.
But the short version is I got into investing because I made quite a bit of money as a street musician when I was 13 in the Netherlands. I made some money, put that in a savings account. Then I intended to buy a really huge stereo for myself for my room. My parents vetoed that. They said, okay, you can have a small radio, or we're gonna do something smart with the rest. That became my first investment in a company at the time called CMG, which was a system integrator from the UK and very big in Europe at the time. And that company later on IPO'd in 1998, and I made a huge return on that. Until that point, other than that my father invested that money for me, I didn't know that much about investing. I got what he was doing, but that's about it. And then I started trading on public exchanges, which I've been doing ever since. And at 21, I joined my father in one of his angel investments in his Series B round in the Netherlands. Actually didn't know at the time it was called Series B, but that's what apparently it was. And I've since then been investing in private companies as well.
What's your, I guess, most interesting private investment experientially? Maybe not just about returns, but the process.
I think I will answer it experientially. My first investment was the most interesting because of that experience. Again, similar to when I bought the stocks when I was 13, I didn't really understand what exactly my father told me was that smart thing to do, which was the investment. But I figured he's a smart man, let's listen to him. And I really like doing it, mostly because of what I learned about investing, meeting the other investors. I got to sit in on investor meetings where the directors of the company were talking about the day-to-day business problems that they had. I got to experience how VCs deal with their companies. Actually, I don't intend to do this with the Zero Emissions Fund, but all companies I've invested in the past, at some point the directors got fired and replaced by the VCs.
Oops.
All the companies also did really well. I'm not sure if there's a correlation necessary, but but experiencing stuff like that, yeah, was very interesting. My actual job and my studies were in a totally different direction. So normally during the day I had very little relation to this topic, but it was just very interesting too. And they all turned out great, or at least fine. So I never lost my money on any of the deals. Some just were kind of equal after 10 years, so that's disappointing. But
well, the fact that you never lost money on any of the deals is probably a track record that few people have.
For the private companies, right?
For the private companies.
I've done the internet bubble and I lost a lot of money.
Oh man, I was still a kid during the internet bubble, so I can only imagine the pain at that point of time.
Every bubble you see on the stock exchanges since 1998, I have done.
It's felt right here.
It's felt right here.
Let's talk about Startup Buddy, because you're ultimately your day job, what you spend most of your time on is your business, Startup Buddy, and I've heard the story of you pretty much coming to Singapore without a network, coming in fresh and building the Startup Buddy. Do you have any thoughts on or something you want to share? Because I think people who have operational experience, building your own business, being an entrepreneur, and then moving on to becoming an investor, bring a different point of view, different experience that they can share and be value added to their investments. As the owner and CEO of Startup Buddy, how has that experience changed you as an investor?
Okay, I will first share a little bit about the Startup Buddy and how that experience is, and then what I think I can add as an investor because of that. First thing I always say to people that ask me, you came to Singapore, you started building your company, how was that experience? Don't do that. Because it's stupid. If you building a startup is already hard enough by itself, don't move to a country where you don't know anybody and try to do it. You just make your life much harder than it already is. Having said that, it's also the most fun thing I've ever done professionally. It went very much by accident. I quit my job at ING at the time. I was actually able to get a new job here at ING, but I participated in Startup Week in Singapore, which is a hackathon that's being organized every year. I really enjoyed doing that, and we ended up winning third prize. And then I figured, you know what, I'm not going to go to ING anymore. I'm going to try something else myself. That was not the Startup Buddy, it was a very different company. I worked with my co-founders on that for 2 years. Learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, and eventually we abandoned that company because we basically didn't have a feasible business model for what we were doing. And then based on that experience, the three of us, we sat down like what went wrong here, because we all had already some corporate history, we all had good studies, we all had some money in the bank. So on the surface we should potentially be successful entrepreneurs. But we basically came to the conclusion that we had taken too long to switch from being employees, where you're paid to be good in 1, 2 or 3 things, to becoming entrepreneurs, where you have to know and fix everything that comes in your path. And that brings me to the second part of your question. What do I bring to the table as an investor? Exactly that. I've done it wrong. I'm now doing it right. I know it's super tough. I think by definition any entrepreneur needs to be respected regardless of their success. Entrepreneurs who've done it for more than 6 months, they have endurance, because if you don't really believe in what you do, you're not going to last that long. I've met too many people over time that became an entrepreneur half a year later, took a contract after all, because it wasn't as sexy as they expected. But it's also super gratifying to get your first contracts, to talk to super smart people, to be able to work with investors, with customers, to build a platform in our case. So I've done all of that. The investing I already explained, I've been doing for a lot of time. So in that sense, I think I'm pretty unique an investor to work with for startups. As the startup body, we now have 3,000 entrepreneurs on the platform. I'm pretty sure in the past 6.5 years I've talked to 4,000 entrepreneurs in any industry. So by now I've gotten a pretty decent eye for what works and what doesn't work, or what they should think of and what not. So I really feel that helps our startups that we're going to invest in a lot other than the money that we're going to provide.
And now with the switch, well, not a switch, but I actually see it as a transition from engaging a lot of these early stage startups and then transitioning into the zero emissions fund, which gives you an opportunity to make early stage bets and support these startups from an early stage. What are you looking for in the fund?
I have been interested in climate change and sustainability probably the majority of a major part of my life already. And I've gotten more and more interested in the past couple of years, reading more about it, the conferences coming up. Basically, a little bit before we met, that kind of clicked in my head, like if I want to invest in something, if I want to set up a fund, and if I want to do that in Singapore, actually it makes a lot of sense to set up in the zero emissions fund and to invest in decarbonisation and basically help reduce climate change. So for the fund, that's what I will be looking at, startups that can help solve what I see as one of the biggest problems of our lifetime in a way that works scalably for a lot of people in this region where I've now been for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about zero emissions fund for at least a couple of months now.
Yeah.
And like Robin, I'm also, I started making my own personal investments. So not on behalf of anyone else, but my own personal investments in the private market, straight up starting off in the sustainability space, in circular economy, what I call second life companies, and over that half a year, that concept actually developed into what it is today with Turn Off, Turn On Ventures, and this whole bicycle touring thing.
Yeah.
In fact, Robin was one of the first people who I shared the idea with. Pretty much it was only an idea in my head. There was no planning, no admin, nothing booked, and I kind of put this idea in front of him. I don't know, Robin, do you want to share do you remember your initial thoughts when I talked about it?
I'm pretty sure I was enthusiastic right away, and I said something like, you should go for it. I'm personally not the long run cycling person, but I think it's a super cool idea. Also very cool to do something like that and make time for that in your life. It happens to be very much aligned with what we're working on in the Zero Emissions Fund as well. But at the time we weren't even discussing working on that together. So I would do the same if I wasn't responsible for a company at the moment.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that I have the flexibility to do it, and I'm very thankful actually for people like yourself who support the idea and say that if you have the time and the flexibility, you should do it. Because I'm doing it. A lot of it is to one, for my own exposure, and two, using the investors that I know and people who support me on this trip to bring their experience and their knowledge to the startups that I meet, and hopefully there's some value there. So startups, if you're seeing this video now, Robin is one of the people who will be following the trip closely and also getting involved in some of the demo days or AMA sessions where you get a chance to talk to him about his experience, or even give your idea, your business, an opportunity to be pitched to people like him. and see what his thoughts are. And I can assure you, Robin is someone who gives like straight up what he thinks as it is, which is super valuable for any startup. So yeah, I think maybe I want to ask one last question. That's based on your unique journey, right? You came from the West, from Europe, you moved here to Asia and Singapore. What is one thing that you think is done very differently in this region that people don't really talk about, but you think is super important to know, whether you're a founder or you're an investor?
Well, both of them. What's very differently here, and by the way, upfront I want to say it's not worse, because it's very often put as being worse. But basically, investors and startups here do stuff that's being done somewhere else already. A lot of people feel that is not the good way to do things, because for some reason being the best or the most innovative seems to be the most sexy thing. I very much disagree. I actually learned that from my co-founder for the Startup Buddy. I think it's actually very valuable that things that have worked somewhere else before are being copied over and then done in a different way in a different context here in Southeast Asia, because that's the only way it usually works. Basically everything that actually it was the reason my first company didn't work, the one that we abandoned after 2 years. That was an idea based very much on my ideas about the financial world in Europe, that I thought I could copy over to Southeast Asia, specifically Singapore. It had to do with financial planning, and it didn't work out because it turned out I totally misunderstood how the market was here in terms of pricing and legislation and how people looked at financial advice and stuff like that. So the product itself wasn't new, and I was trying to apply something that we had been doing in a certain way in the Netherlands for a long time over here, and that totally failed. The idea itself wasn't bad, because there's some really good companies like Endowa, Stashaway that started around the same time and that are hugely successful right now. So the idea was perfectly fine. It was just my understanding of this context and how it should be done that was totally wrong. In general, I feel that's the strong suit for most entrepreneurs and investors here in the region, bringing things that have worked in other economies that are already a little bit further in their development over here, usually testing them or launching them in Singapore, which is a very good test market for a lot of things, and then expanding them around the region, which purely from an economic point of view and an investor point of view is ultra attractive, because it's a huge region, it's growing economies, young populations, people are eager to work hard to discover new things. So the opportunity for these things, in my opinion, is way bigger than what I'm used to in Europe mostly. In Europe, typically, if you start a new company, you will be able to catch part of a market that's already being captured by somebody else, and you need to chip away from them. Here, if you do something right, sometimes you go into a greenfield market and you can just get market leadership almost overnight, which is totally impossible in the West. So I think that's what the great startups and the great investors in this region are doing, and I also think that's where our fund is going to add value.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Robin, and I know that we are going to meet again next week and in the following months.
I'm pretty sure after that also.
So we'll speak again. But guys, this is Robin Teurlings, and you probably will be seeing more of him on the channel in the next few months. So yeah, I personally definitely look forward to that.
Thanks a lot. See you.
See you guys.
Okay, my rule about people that pretend to be experts about something is very simple. If they cannot explain something, they're probably not an expert. Because the smartest people that really understand what they do, they can always, to a layman, explain what it is that they do. Because they really know their shit. People who sort of understand what they do, they take hours to explain it. The more people need to talk about what they want to tell you, the less they probably get what they're doing.